East African Republic. On October the 21st, 1969, there took place a bloodless socialist revolution in Somalia, one of whose first aims was to forge a healthy economy based upon the united talents of her people. In traditional handicrafts, for example, crafts of wood carving, of stone cutting, ivory, metal, and leatherwork, there previously existed only the single craftsman, catering in a haphazard way for the needs of his tiny local clientele. The revolution changed that, setting up fully equipped cooperatives, in which the craftsman's skills could be enhanced through contact with his fellows, in which he could create more and better goods for an expanding market, including a hard currency market overseas. Since the socialist revolution, cotton, for centuries a staple product of the nearby Sudan and of Egypt, has been grown in Somalia on experimental farms set up by the government. In the Shabelle region, the Somaltex textile factory at Balad was built and equipped with the most modern equipment. The intention at the outset was to make the country self-sufficient in bleached and dyed cotton fabrics, an objective now achieved with an annual production of 10 million yards. In the government's plan, hard currency resources previously spent on costly textile imports can now be diverted to other vital development projects. Weaving and pattern making have always been traditional Somali crafts, and the new freedoms offered by a domestic textile industry are encouraging still further these already developed skills. Lying so close to the equator, Somalia grows a great variety of fruits and vegetables. To package these for sale and export, the government built the huge Etop factory at Afgoy. Its positioning is excellent, lying in the very center of the fruit-growing district of the Shabelle and close to Mogadishu's export harbor. Somalia's greatest export is meat, not only as livestock, but also canned and processed. For this reason, the government set up two large canning factories, one in Mogadishu and another in Kismayu to the south. Kismayu now exports some 300 million tins of stewed steak a year to the Soviet Union, while large quantities of corned beef are marketed in Egypt and other countries of the Middle East. 2,000 miles of coastline give Somalia a further natural resource to develop, and fish factories are a growing feature of her coastal towns. The main one at Las Korai in the north is designed to process an annual minimum of 5,000 tons of tuna fish for export. Success in this has led the Ministry of Fisheries and its related agencies to expand their operations and to purchase growing numbers of fishing vessels and storage facilities for the industry. Before the revolution, Somalia's domestic needs were met almost entirely by costly foreign imports. Since 1969, she has gone a long way towards rectifying the situation. The Bail factory in the capital, for instance, now produces soap products, detergents and shampoos, sufficient to meet the entire country's needs. Another light industry developed since the revolution is that of tile making and ceramics here in Mogadishu. Made entirely from stone quarried locally in Burhakaba, the ceramics are the work of local craftsmen, encouraged by the flourishing industry. The finished product now meets not only the nation's needs, but also forms a small but useful source of hard currency revenue through export sales to Somalia's Arab neighbors. Tobacco has been grown on an experimental basis in Somalia for the past 16 years. Following the revolution, the government undertook to build a cigarette factory in Mogadishu that now turns out over 1 million cigarettes a day. The same factory also produces matches of timber cut from the southern forests of Jilib in the lower Juba. This factory, recently built in Mogadishu, is designed to make pasta, spaghetti, macaroni, rigate, from Somali maize, with the aim of making the country self-sufficient in these very essential, very basic foodstuffs. Somalia is famous for her agricultural produce, and above all for her bananas. Bananas are the country's principal cash crop, being exported to the Arab countries and to those of the European Economic Community, such as Italy. From the banana, Somalia earns a full 30% of her entire hard currency revenue. Bananas apart, Somalia is rapidly developing her capacity for producing rice, often in regions far from her two main rivers and based around expanding irrigation schemes. Experimental farms with quality control machinery and facilities for testing various strains are rapidly confirming her government's insistence that soon she can become self-sufficient in rice of the very highest quality. At the same time, Somali farmers working on a cooperative basis and helped by the volunteer labor force called into being by the government's plea for crash programs to develop national resources, have been rapidly expanding the country's output of crops such as maize, sorghum, groundnuts, and millet. Even non-tropical vegetables such as tomatoes and onions are being grown successfully. But still, livestock is the country's mainstay. Somalia exports literally hundreds of thousands of beasts, cattle, camels, sheep and goats to the Arab countries, where they are highly prized above almost all others. Somalia's livestock has long enjoyed relative immunity from endemic diseases such as anthrax, a fact lately reinforced by the institution of a vigorous government campaign to encourage the use of animal vaccines. With agriculture and livestock playing so vital a part in the country's export drive, Somalia is also building up her own fleet of ships for their transportation. She has invested in larger, more efficient port and harbour facilities. The great Red Sea port of Berbera has already been expanded, while on the Indian Ocean, the capital harbour of Mogadishu is currently being extended to double its present capacity. For centuries, Somalia has been a 100% Muslim country. Yet its religion is far from being confined to the mosque. From the earliest times, Somali children received a basic education in the Quranic schools. Now, since the revolution, and for the very first time in all her history, the country has also her own national schools and university, with Somali teachers giving lessons from books printed in the Somali language. And yet still, the Quranic schools form the basis for a Somali ethic in which the very practical, very pragmatic doctrines of Holy Islam become not mere words, but a very real force and way of life for the people of the young socialist nation.
والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. اللهم اهدنا بهداك واجعلنا ممن يسارع في رضاك ولا تولنا وليا سواك. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Africa had a role to play. It has a role as a raw material producer. We will not allow sub-Saharan Africa to escape that. Okay, we do everything to keep sub-Saharan Africa where it is, also impoverished. It's absolutely vital for the prosperity of everyone else. So let's get clear about that. Okay, and this means all the economic structures, all the global institutions, and the economics we teach everyone is all designed to keep Africa exactly where it is. And whether it is Europe or US or now China, it's always the same. We need Africa to be impoverished because we need those raw materials and we need them dirt cheap. Okay, so that's the message. Keep our stranglehold on them. And that's what we have done. We have done, the IMF and the World Bank. And they've also done something very, very important. And that is they have destroyed the self-sufficiency of these countries. Colonization started it. Okay? One of the most important things is we destroy food self-sufficiency. Okay? And the World Bank continued it. They forced most countries to eliminate all food subsidies and food support. Okay? Because once you don't produce your own food, I increase my control over you. How do we know this? Well, very funny thing happened some years ago. Not so funny, actually. It involved starvation of a large number of people in Malawi. Okay? Many of you could remember this because it was really tragic. But the Malawian finance minister, who was under terrible threat at the time, suddenly broke ranks and he said, well, you know why we had this famine? Because one of the conditions of the loan given by the World Bank was we destroyed all our grain surplus stocks. Why? Because remember, we want you dependent. 1970s, the US Senate, the US Congress said, we will not allow Latin America to produce their own food. We will start a strategy involving the IMF and the World Bank to destroy food self-sufficiency of Latin America. Then they will indeed be our true backyard. And that's exactly what they've done. Look at all the Latin American countries. Look at them. They used to be food self-sufficient, but they're no longer food self-sufficient. Now here comes the kicker. This is the beautiful part of it. I congratulate them. You know I admire them because they do it so well. Okay? I know it sounds really perverse. But we have now in the WTO something called the Agreement on Agriculture. Okay? You know what that Agreement on Agriculture states? It says, if you don't have any subsidies, you're not allowed to put these subsidies on food. But if you have subsidies and income support for food production, you can keep them. Who has all the subsidies and income support? US, Europe. The largest budgets in the world for supporting their farmers are Europe and US. But the World Bank and IMF have destroyed all those subsidies. You see, all those subsidies have been destroyed. And now we're telling these countries, you don't have subsidies, tough luck. You know? You see, we're keeping them dependent. We're keeping them neck straight. We have lots of examples in the WTO to really stop Africa industrializing. This is the crucial thing. We cannot allow them to produce manufacturers. It's not difficult. Trust me, it's not difficult. We need nationalist governments. We need them committed to industrialization, and it won't take them a decade to move out from where they are. This is the fundamental point. It's not difficult. But this next round of the WTO is designed to block that.